Donald Trump, thanks to his recent interview with the New York Times, has left many wondering what the future of NATO would be if he were actually to become president. And the reason is the response to a couple of the questions having to do with Russia. So this question was asked to Donald Trump. If Russia came over the border into Estonia or Latvia, Lithuania, places that Americans don't think all that often about, would you come to their immediate military aid? And that's sort of a question that's supposed to get him to simply agree with our obligations under NATO of collective defense. He said, I don't want to tell you what I do because I don't want Putin to know what I do. I have a serious chance of becoming president, and I'm not like Obama, that every time they send troops into Iraq or anyplace else, he has a news conference to announce it. Sanger, the interviewer, responds, they are NATO members and we are treaty obligated. Trump jumps on top of that to say, we have many NATO members that aren't paying their bills. Sanger says that's true, but we are treaty obligated under NATO. Forget the bills part. Trump says you can't forget the bills. They have an obligation to make payments. And so they go on to talk about it more, and Trump sticks with that same message, that they have obligations to pay. He feels that they're not paying enough. And because of that, the assurances that we've had in place for multiple decades that if any member of NATO is attacked by an outside force, whether it's Russia or any other, that you will then have to fight all of NATO together, is now gone. There's no actual legal obligation to assist in the defense. It is simply the assurance that's provided by the states that they will defend the others. And that, under Trump, will now be in question.
So this is how small minds think. This is what every president who has never had a plan says, whether they're a presidential candidate or a sitting president. I have a secret plan. But wait a minute, we're trying to decide whether we should pick you as president or not. So if your plan is secret, and let's say Hillary Clinton also has a secret plan, how do we know which one's is better? So what a preposterous thing to say in a democracy. And to say, look, for example, I've laid out a plan on how to defeat ISIS. And it involves special forces, better intelligence, etc. If you do that plan, it's not like ISIS is like, oh, they're going to gather intelligence on us. Oh, they're going to use special forces. Yeah, of course we are. Yeah. That's not a surprise to them. So it's what a person who doesn't have a plan hides behind.
They literally made that joke on The Office while they were about to hire a new manager. Would Donald Trump hire a manager who, when he asked, okay, what would you change in the Trump organization? The guy said, oh, I don't want you to know. I don't want the employees to be able to prepare for it. It's a secret plan. Would that guy get a second interview? No, he'd be out the door.
You know, Michael Isikoff was on a couple of our shows on Monday, and talking to him earlier today, Michael Isikoff, who runs the investigative unit at Yahoo News, right?
Yes.
And, you know, the story that he broke on Monday, this is part of that story. And it is by far, by a landslide, the biggest story at this convention. It's really the only piece of actual news at this. The other stuff is the politics of theater and the theater of politics, and that stuff is interesting and worth reporting. But he talked about the ties and reminded people of the ties that Paul Manafort has to the pro-Russian Ukrainian president named
Medvedev?
No, the other one. Anyway, the pro-Russian Ukrainian president, right? We didn't. And then the tie.
Pro-Russian Ukrainian.
Right, and the ties that Lieutenant General Michael Flynn had to RT, and that he was paid to go to Russia, who's become one of Trump's top foreign policy advisors and his campaign manager. And now Trump, with the second round, after saying that he liked and admired Vladimir Putin, who locks prisoners up, locks journalists up, a wildly anti-gay agenda, aggressively, dangerously, far more dangerous than the disturbing anti-gay agenda in the United States, an actual dangerous anti-gay agenda in Russia. And Trump keeps standing up for him. And here, Trump is essentially, by signaling to Vladimir Putin that we might not back up our NATO allies, including Estonia, who responded within instantly, the Estonian president, like, we've paid in full. We're one of 5 NATO members that's paid our 2%, because the capital of Duke Gingrich described Estonia as being a suburb of St. Petersburg. It's 230 miles away, the capital of Estonia. But that whole, he is telling, unquestionably, every foreign policy expert in the country will tell you Vladimir Putin is paying attention. And if he thinks he could roll into Estonia with no threat from NATO, Vladimir Putin will. and I'm sorry, I know I'm rambling, but I think it's a really big story. And critically, now to turn it back to politics, said better than I just said it. The Hillary Clinton people ought to be hammering. Forget,
Yes.
but I mean, right, pro-Putin Trump. This guy is a we have
And
not
pro-Trump Putin.
That's right, and pro-Trump
Is it a
Putin.
good thing that Putin likes one candidate a whole lot?
No, it's
Why would that be a good
terrible
thing?
But it's not just Putin. It's also Kim Jong-un, and also Trump has been
Yeah,
saying
that's true.
favorable things about Erdogan, which is amazing. So Trump said supportive things about Erdogan after he squashed the coup. And it's really interesting because he was also quoted as saying that he plans on working with Erdogan to combat ISIS. Except Erdogan has been helping ISIS.
Yeah.
There's been numerous examples of him, and intelligence in Turkey, giving ISIS a pass when it comes to crossing through their territory and things like that. And so I don't know. Does he know anything about foreign policy? I mean, that's the issue. He knows nothing about foreign policy. He knows very little, if anything, about domestic policy, which is why he wanted Kasich to be his VP and take over both those things. Because he doesn't really want to be president. He doesn't really have any policy ideas.
So it should be obvious, but I think we have to break it down and make clear why this is so horrifying. NATO was set up, the system of collective defense was set up to provide assurance of likely outcomes if certain things happen in international politics. Because if you simply had, everybody says up until Trump, if you attack Estonia or Latvia or Lithuania, whatever, we will fight you, then Putin knows that he can't do that, and so you don't have war. If we made clear we have no connection with them, then he could attack them.
Yes.
He would take it over, the sort of conquest he's already done, and that would be that. But if you indicate that we won't defend it, possibly, and he has to test us, that's how you get a war between the US and Russia. Because we will actually, in the end, defend these countries. But if he moves in, he takes some territory, builds up his forces, then they have to start to defend, they have to build up their own defense, independent of NATO. That's the sort of escalation of conflict on both sides that led to the world wars that we had. And we have had unprecedented peace in that part of the world, specifically because of organizations like NATO, which provide assurance to world leaders that there are certain lines you can't cross. And especially when you consider the changes in the Russian military over the past 2 or 3 decades, where their former conventional forces have been allowed to degrade, they have now made clear in their policy documents that nuclear war, the use of nuclear weapons, is now not a last option. It is now a part of their military arsenal. And because they don't have the conventional forces necessary to go up against NATO forces or the US, if we get into a war with them, they are much closer than they would have been during the actual Cold War to use nuclear weapons. And that's what Donald Trump is just casually joking about because he wants to get $1 billion or $2 billion more dollars from fucking Lithuania each year. He's willing to risk nuclear war with Russia.
But my concern is that not that he wants $1 million or $2 million more from Lithuania for NATO forces. My concern is that with the ties of Manafort and now Michael Flynn and others, that there's some very, very rich Russian oligarchs, including Putin. Trump, remember, got into this political sphere in the first place to make money because he's in the attention business. So the more attention he gets, the more he can sell his name for. He's a incompetent businessman. He's bankrupted 4 companies. The only thing he has of value left is that he sells his name to other people who can actually build buildings. And that's what he does. So, and he has been unscrupulous in everything he's ever done, including, for example, a notorious scam like Trump University. You think that guy is above making a deal with some incredibly rich people in Russia?
Yeah.
So I don't know what the contours of that are, and I don't know if he's setting up for that. I doubt he's already done it. But that's the kind of things that go through Donald Trump's head, because he doesn't care about America. He cares about Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And he thinks, hey, maybe at the end of this, I can find a way to make more money for myself.
Yeah.
It's not hyperbole. We're not just talking about risks to judges that would make it. These are serious issues that would make it potentially very difficult for women in poor states to get the proper prenatal care, to say nothing of being able to get a legal and safe abortion. You're talking about potential rapid destabilization of the entire Western world.
Yeah.
Okay, and one last thing. I just got to double down on what Ben and John are saying here. I think John laid it out great. That's what I talk about when I say the guy is a danger to the republic. He doesn't respect the rule of law. He doesn't respect the press. He doesn't respect our Constitution. But he's also a danger to the world. If he says, go ahead, Russia, take Estonia, and that's exactly what his, when Newt Gingrich goes out and says it's a suburb of St. Petersburg, no message has ever been clearer. That is an open call to aggression and then to possible devolving situation that John laid out. And that is a danger to us all. We can't have this madman run the country.
And from Newt Gingrich, a Reaganite Republican, to encourage an obviously aggressive Russian president to have at it with those republics.
Who's already annexed territory in the very recent future. Also, a much more subtle criticism of, or a much smaller criticism of Donald Trump. I really think, look, I was talking with CJ online about whether he knows as much as a first-year international relations student about the history of these organizations or why they matter. And I know I'm basically a third-year international relations student. He has no idea why we set these things up. He says, they're not paying enough. First of all, as if they would pay us directly, which isn't even how it works. But just having the peace gives us, the return on that investment is probably incalculable. The fact that we now have stable markets in Europe and the rest of the world in that region, that we can trade in the benefit to Europe that then trickles over to us. He thinks literally just the dollars spent on defense, that's how you calculate the value of international peace and stability.
I know, John, but look, the part of it that troubles me the most is not only what he wants to do or what he would do, but how he sells it to the American people. And he sells it with, hey, you know what? We need to stop, focusing on other countries, and we need to focus on our country, right? It's all about us. And he's quoted as saying that, and I think it resonates with a lot of people because they're angry. They know that we've been at war for decades now. And so when they hear that he wants to disband NATO or doesn't want to protect certain countries that are part of NATO, well, other, people who vote for him are like, yeah, why are we supporting them? Why are we wasting our time with other countries when we can focus on our own country?